So, earlier when I was putting this episode together, when I was gathering news sources, I was going to open with a joke. And the first sentence was going to be my joke. It was going to be kind of, I don't know, provocative maybe, or shocking. It wasn't that big of a joke, but it was kind of a condescending sort of my version of a jab towards towards an issue that I have. Basically, at the beginning of the intro message that I wrote, I asked a question, which was my joke. Without government, who would shoot your dog? And this episode is called Government Force. It's the first episode of my Logan For Liberty podcast. I wrote that joke and I finished compiling stories and writing my thoughts down and basically making my show map. And then this article gets released. It's kind of old now, and it's something that's been happening since 2016, I believe. The city of Detroit will pay $225,000 to settle a civil rights lawsuit stemming from a 2016 marijuana raid that left 3 dogs shot to death by police. And I wrote the question as a joke, as a condescending joke, and then I was going to go straight into my podcast, into the episode, and read my intro message. And then I go on Facebook and I'm scrolling through, because I'm like, all right, I put this show map together. I feel good. This is going to be a great episode. And then that article pops up. And I'm just like, seriously? And so I had to include it, and this is going to be the first story that I cover. The Detroit City Council approved the settlement this February to Kenneth Savage and Ashley Franklin, who filed a federal lawsuit against the city and 3 Detroit police officers last July. The lawsuit alleged the officers shot Savage and Franklin's 3 dogs while the animals were enclosed behind an 8-foot-tall fence. Also, the officers could confiscate several potted marijuana plants in the backyard. And this is why I put this into the episode. So this is an episode about government force, but it's not an episode about police brutality. So I'm not mixing in family dogs that have been shot with unarmed black men or unarmed white men even. So this isn't an episode about police brutality. This episode is about government force. And it'll make more sense when I get into the intro message and go on with my show map. Right, now this is entirely off the cuff, last minute addition I made, so you'll have to excuse me. These aren't police busting through a door and then shooting the family dog that growls at them or rushes them because they broke into somebody's house. This is the police shooting a dog that is on the other side of a fence so they can get some marijuana plants. Detroit has been sued multiple times over the past few years for police shootings of dogs. In 2016, the council approved a $100,000 settlement to a man after police shot his dog while it was securely chained to a fence. A 2016 recent investigation found that the Detroit Police Department's Major Violators Unit, which conducts hundreds of drug raids a year in the city, had a nasty habit of leaving dead dogs in its wake. One officer had killed 69 dogs over the course of his career. Public records obtained by Reason showed that officer is now up to 73 kills according to the most recent records. So I just want to interject a little bit here. I find this story appalling because I have a dog. And if somebody broke into my house, shot my dog, I would probably shoot that person back. And that reaction to me would be the same if somebody broke into my house or, tried to hurt my girlfriend or tried to steal my property. I'm going to shoot them for breaking into my house, nonetheless shooting my dog. But because they have a police badge, they have a badge, they are a government authority, you have no legal recourse. Well, you do in this case. But in the moment somebody shoots your dog, you can't do a damn thing about it except sue. That's if you win the lawsuit. This man, a single man, killed 73 dogs. And I know I'm making a huge deal about dogs, but this applies no matter what. No humans should get shot over marijuana. I would even go as far and be a little more radical and say no human should be shot over any dog. Not any dog, any drug. I digress. According to a search warrant, a Detroit police officer, while investigating an unrelated matter, observed several marijuana plants outdoors of the home of Savage Franklin and their son. 2 days later, 8 Detroit police officers arrived at the house. Police were aware Savage and Franklin had a permit to grow medical marijuana, but the plants were in violation because they were visible outside, the search warrant said. So imagine this. You have permission to grow marijuana, but the police are going to show up to your house because it's visible. And, okay, I don't know. I don't know how to describe. I could see if you have maybe anti-nudity laws and you're walking in front of this giant panel, this giant window in your living room, fucking butt naked, dick swinging and everything. I would get if the police knocked on your door and was like, hey, you're in the nude, close your blinds. But this person had permission to... Let me be transparent. I am not a fan of marijuana. I despise marijuana. But with that being said, I don't think that my personal opinion or my hatred towards the drug should prohibit you from being able to grow and smoke something that you want, especially something like marijuana. Because I acknowledge that marijuana isn't like heroin. It's not like opioids. It's not meth. Okay, marijuana, I think something that most people should be able to agree on is that out of every single illegal drug, illegal substance, marijuana is one of those drugs that should be legal because it is nowhere close to any of the other drugs. Anyway, so yeah, imagine you have permission to grow plant, to grow pot, but simply because it's visible to people and somebody saw it, the police show up to your door and they shoot 3 of your dogs that were enclosed behind a fence because they had to get that marijuana plant. When Franklin showed police her marijuana paperwork and demanded to see a search warrant, an officer responded, if you keep asking for a warrant, we're going to kill those dogs and call Child Protective Services to pick up your kid, the lawsuit says. So let's just go over something. If you're a police officer and you're trying to enter private property, you need a warrant. Okay, just get a warrant, man. I hate to go Rand Paul on you, but just get a warrant. I don't care what it's about. If you're going to search somebody's house, provide a warrant, and then more often than not, they'll let you walk through. And this police officer threatened to kill the dogs and then call Child Protective Services. Can try to wrap your mind around that? This officer threatened force against their dogs and threatened to take their kids away. Imagine you're the person who's being told that. You have nothing compared to the force of these people. You have nothing. If you even strike a cop, you're going to jail. Officers detained Franklin and searched the house, but could not get to the marijuana plants because of the dogs. They initially called animal control, but decided to destroy the animals, the lawsuit says. Officers shot and killed 1 dog through the fence, broke into the backyard enclosure, and fatally shot the other 2. Animal control arrived 10 minutes later. So, let me extend an olive branch and say, okay, marijuana is absolutely bad. Let me extend this olive branch and try to see it from the other side. And we already know, you guys already know, if you're listening to this, that I'm not a huge fan of marijuana. But call animal control. But you're being impatient. You need to get to that marijuana plant. Is it really worth the lives of 3 dogs that belong to your citizens? Do you really gotta threaten to kill their dogs? I mean, is a marijuana plant that important that you can't be like, hey, we're going in, okay, with or without a warrant? Can you lock up your dogs so we don't shoot them? I mean, you can't do something like that. Instead, you detain the person without providing a warrant, by the way. All this man asked for was a warrant. If you had had a warrant, he would have let you in. No dogs would have been shot. This lawsuit would have been settled, and no libertarian-minded people or anti-police people would talk about this. And I know I'm making a big deal about dogs. Don't worry, I'll make a big deal about unarmed people being shot or marijuana raids. There's a whole bunch. I have one in this show map, so we'll get on to that later. So let me now begin with my intro message. Without government, who would shoot your dog? It's kind of a nice segue. Now, when I talk about government overreach or police brutality, I try to be careful. It is easy to go into an angry Alex Jones style rant. Somehow, that wouldn't be any worse than burning my own city to the ground. I'm upset at my government. However, it isn't 1776. So I can't march into Washington, D.C. with a rifle. I also don't want to risk sounding like an angry conspiracy theorist. I want to be taken seriously, and I also won't destroy my own community. You might as well burn your own house down if you're gonna protest and burn your own community. We the people theoretically own the government with our consent. We institute government to protect our rights. We also delegate power to the states to operate within our self-interests. However, we've gotten to a point where our representatives have been given crowns. We have shifted from representatives to leaders, and that's dangerous. The government is supposed to be our ally. Now it acts more like our parents. You plebes can't be trusted to regulate your own houses. You might ruin your own lives. So we'll shoot your dogs. Don't worry, my elected senator knows how to run your life. Ladies and gentlemen, my elected senator, Ron Wyden, knows how to run your life. If it pleases the crown, may I turn my property into living spaces for people looking for homes? Yes, of course. Only if I wait 4 years and spend $1 million. In San Francisco, Robert Tillman, who owns a single-story laundromat since 2014, has been attempting to develop his property into a 75-unit apartment building. The city is in the midst of a housing affordability crisis, with an average one-bedroom apartment going for $3,400 a month. So you might think Tillman's project would sail through the permitting process. Instead, the city's labyrinthine process of reviews, regulations, and appeals has dragged on for 4 years. The project has cost the self-described accidental developer nearly $1 million so far, and he hasn't even broken ground yet. I don't know if you know this, but it kind of insinuates it in the article. California, especially San Francisco, is going through a housing crisis. They don't have enough homes, and there's a high demand to live there. Not only is there a high demand to live there, there's so many regulations that rent is skyrocketing. It's bad enough that there's demand, but on top of that, the demand plus the regulation shoots up your rent to $3,400 for a single bedroom apartment. Imagine how much it would cost for a 2-bedroom apartment or a 3-bedroom apartment. It's taken me longer to get to this point than it took for the United States to win World War II. Yeah, that's true, says Tillman. And my site is the easiest site in the city to build. In a sane world, it would be easy. No housing is located at the site, so there's no fear that redevelopment will displace any tenants. There are 3 other coin-operated laundromats within 100 yards of Tillman's property, so there is no real concern about lost neighborhood services. Half of the property is a parking lot, so the city won't be losing an aesthetically pleasing landmark. On top of that, Tillman's lot is a 3-minute walk from the 24th Mission Street BART Light Rail Station, a major plus for a city obsessed with transit-oriented development. So not only does this man have a service that is desperately needed, maybe he can lower the rent in that city by $100. Maybe maybe it's only going to help by $100. 3,400 average is worse than 3,300 average. 3,300 average a month is a little bit better than 3,400. I know it doesn't sound like a big deal, but imagine if this man spent 4 years and $1 million to build a house, to build a place on a property that he already owns. That's crazy to me. And to me, that seems like part of the problem. I wonder why rent is $3,400 a month. Because you're not letting people build houses. Just wait, it gets worse. Oh, not only that, this place is strategically placed. Because he realizes, hey, there's three other laundromats within a football distance away from mine. A football field distance away from mine. Just down the street. You don't need that many laundromats. Kind of need homes. Not only that, this population center, or this is right next to a train station. So these people moving in here, maybe they'll save money not owning a car. They'll just take the public transit, which is right here by my apartment building, or by my laundromat, where I want my apartment building. It's so strategically placed, but yet he spent 4 years and $1 million trying to build it and hasn't had any luck. In March 2014, when Tillman first submitted his plans to the San Francisco Planning Department, the initial reaction was positive. Officials were very much in favor of developing the site, Tillman says. The real opposition came from some of the neighbors. A community meeting in January 2016 served as something of a flashpoint. At the meeting, one woman fretted that the tall building would violate the privacy of a nearby public school. Another argued that the project needed to be 100% affordable housing. Two representatives from local Latino Cultural District, Cali 24, said that even a 100% affordable housing project was out of the question, given the proposed height of the development. So let's just tackle that right there. One woman said that the building would violate the privacy of a nearby public school. My question is, how? What are they going to see into the classroom? Through the windows? What are they going to look at the playground when kids are playing? Were they going to see the bus stop? We're not going to build houses around schools? Not only that, if there's a school nearby, build an apartment building nearby. Maybe some of the parents of the students can live in those apartment buildings, and then they're in walking distance from the school. Therefore, that family saves money on transportation, using the bus, or even the public, just the public transit service in general. Maybe they save money on gas if they happen to own a car, which, by the way, is expensive in California. And it'll save the school district money because maybe it'll save them some gas. Let's say that this apartment building can hold 100 people. That's 100 people that live closer, that don't need to be driven. They can walk. Not only that, you're building housing next to a school. That's good for the neighborhood. And then one person complained that it needed to be a 100% affordable housing. Why? Your housing is already unaffordable. So he wants to build a house to tackle the issue of the unaffordability of the houses that are in your location. So that doesn't make sense to me. It just seems like people, even left-wing progressives are like this. Whenever there's any change, they don't like it. They find some reason. We see that with environmentalists. And I'm actually going to dedicate a whole episode to that because it's actually close to me. It's close to the area I live in and the type of work I do for a living. And they made a big deal about the proposed height of the development, even if it was 100% affordable, which is absolutely ridiculous. Yes, it's probably going to be pretty tall, so what? And they'll cover why the height is a problem, and I'll address that. When Tillman said he saw his project as necessary so people like his daughter could afford to come back and live in the city, one particularly motivated activist said she wished his daughter was killed in the terrorist attack. So, you want to talk about all these left-wing progressives that, especially females, that talk about all the rape threats they get, This man is trying to build an apartment building, and somebody wished that his daughter would die in a terrorist attack. So it goes both sides. It's not just right-wing people that are, or men that are threatening women or leftists or Muslims or whatever. Left-wing people do it too when it comes to the environment, and sometimes even vegans and vegetarians. They'll do that type of shit all the time. And to me, that's ridiculous. We act like it's a one-sided thing. I recognize that it comes from both the left and the right. It's kind of a tangent, but whatever. Nevertheless, Tillman persisted, working with the planning department to change the design of his development where necessary, and spending tens and thousands of dollars more on various impact studies. That includes $6,500 on a wind study, $5,000 on a shadow study, and $189,000 in city fees by the end of 2017. Meanwhile, the San Francisco Planning Commission, which oversees the planning department and is responsible for approving new developments, continued to push for changes. So, I'll address that one by one. A wind study, $6,500 on a wind study. I get that you put an obstruction and there'll be some draft. The wind will change direction slightly. It'll go around the buildings. That's so... You're putting a slight effect of a building redirecting some wind over the lives of people struggling to find a living space, living paycheck to paycheck. You're putting the wind and the slight consequence of a single building displacing some of that wind over people who need homes and cheaper homes and who need something that is convenient for them. A home that is next to a school and next to a public transit center. And then a shadow study, $5,000. A shadow study in California, by the way. Oh God, we're putting this building that might cast a shadow over the playground of these school children. That's going to block out some of that hot-ass sun that they have down there in California. And then, of course, with regulation and other rules, you have to pay $189,000 to the city, basically for permission and getting all the right fees and permits. That's just one thing. Parroting many of the mission activists' concerns, Commissioner Rich Hillis complained that the design was bulky and a bit out of character with the neighborhood, while Commissioner Catherine Moore said that erecting an 84-foot-tall building would be like plopping a foreign object into this area and not thinking about the consequences, thanks to California's state density bonus law, which restricts localities' ability to reject housing developments that reserve a certain percentage of their units for below-market tenants. The commission was largely prevented from imposing new conditions. After another 3-month delay, the commission voted on November 30th, 2017 to approve the project. So, we'll get onto that. That sounds like good news, but it's not good news. And I'm spending a lot of time on this story because it's just so indicative of the problems that California face and these regulatory policies that some of these people running for office push. So not only are they're using any excuse in the book that would not allow housing for people that need it in an area where it's expensive to live already because there's a lack of housing, because there's a high demand. And it's next to a school, which would be beneficial for people with kids that go to school. And then there's a public transit center close by, which would be perfect for people who don't have a car or who want to get rid of their car so they can save money. You save $160 on insurance. Maybe you're still paying off your car. You save $160 to $200. Well, actually, I don't know how insurance is in California or how the regulations skew it. Out here, $160 to $200 insurance. $160 if you're paying off your car, maybe to $200, $250. We'll say that you're not paying off your car. It's still $160 that you're paying on car insurance. And then gasoline. How much does that cost you a month? Well, it depends on how much driving. I easily burn through $100 to $200 a month on gasoline because I drive a lot. And I have a 2007 vehicle, by the way. So I just want to clarify that. So maybe these people would save $200, $300. They'd pocket $200, $300 because they don't have a car. Public transit is right there. School's nearby. They don't have to drive their kids to work. You save the city some gas money. Whatever, that's besides the point. Let's continue. California's... No. So, the commission voted in November 30th, 2017 to approve the project. So, that meant Tillman could move forward with the construction, right? Well, of course not. It just set off another round of delays. California's Environmental Quality Act allows anyone to file an environmental appeal within 30 days of a project's approval, requiring local agencies essentially to reevaluate the environment and community impact evaluations they've already performed. On January 2nd, attorney Scott Weaver filed just such an appeal on behalf of the Cali 24 District Council, claiming that the city had conducted an insufficient review of the project's environmental impacts, including the impact of increased shadow on a nearby school and of the potential displacement of businesses and residents. Remember, the property in question houses 0 current residents, and the only business there is Tillman's. The planning department also said that new information had been presented suggesting that Tillman's property might be a historic resource. You see, the building once housed a local employment agency back in the 1970s. Also, it once featured a mural depicting the life of a Latina woman. The mural no longer exists, and it's no longer an employment agency. Nevertheless, on February 13th, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to require a historic evaluation to be done at Tillman's expense. They will revisit the house, they said, in another 4 months. To date, Tillman has spent $947,000 in development costs. Tillman, who already owns the land he wants to develop and whose laundromat business still pulls some $10,000 a month, says he can afford to wait. Other developers, watching land and construction costs increase with each delay, might have given up long ago. Sorry, I stuttered through that last part. Excuse me. But the biggest cost may be one that isn't falling on Tillman's shoulders. Well, what's the cost of the people who would have occupied those units, Tillman asks. Those people don't have housing for 6 months. Put a number on that. Boom, right there on... He just hit the nail on the head. Fucking, he grabbed that hammer and whammed that nail in. And let me explain why. There are people that need housing. This is an 80-foot proposal to build a house. These people need housing for whatever reason. Maybe they need to live closer to the school. Maybe they need to live closer to public transit. Maybe they need a house in general because rent is so expensive and we need more housing because there's a high demand to live there. And this man, by the way, owns his own property. You see, you might threaten the environment if you renovate property that has already been built on. Bringing in consumers to a commercial district might have negative effects on commercial businesses, as they tried to state. I love these stories because I don't even need to write jokes. So, you're probably wondering, why is this in an episode about government forests? Well, what happens if he builds on property that he already owns, that he's already built on? All he's doing is building higher, and he's renovating his current space and building higher. He's not taking up more land. It's already in property that he owns. And because it might cast a shadow over his school, it might ruin business somehow by bringing in consumers. If he decides to build much needed housing for people that need housing, who's going to show up to enforce the laws that he broke? The police? Hey, you built this 80-foot building that casts a shadow over the elementary school, so here's a fine. And if you don't pay that fine, you're going to jail. I hope I can build these much needed homes, if I may. I wouldn't want to subject school children to shadows in California with heat. So let's continue on. Don't you dare pull out a garden hose in California. Californians will have to start living with dusty cars and dry lawns if the state's Water Resource Control Board has its way. The board is proposing a number of strict prohibitions on water use to deal with a recently declared drought in Southern California, including bans on washing your vehicle with a garden hose, watering your garden 48 hours before it rains, and even hosing down your driveway. If the board's proposal goes into effect, engaging in any of this sort of water usage will earn the violator a hefty $500 fine. The rules were first imposed on a temporary basis at the direction of California Governor Jerry Brown during the state's 2014 drought, and were phased out as the effects of the drought lessened in 2017. But with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's drought monitor declaring 44% of the state to be in moderate to severe drought last week, the Water Resource Control Board is proposing to make them permanent. Water Board Chairwoman Felicia Marquez told the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, "We're not in an emergency right now, but shame on us if we just bury our heads in the sand. Allow people to go out and waste water by washing down the driveway with a hose when a broom would do." Of the 3.4 million acre feet of water saved by all the conservation methods during California's 2014-2017 drought, the Water Board estimates that only 1% of the savings, some 12,489 acre feet, was a result of the end-user restrictions that might soon become permanent. That's because the kinds of behaviors targeted by the proposed regulations make up a tiny fraction of California's water usage. According to the numbers compiled between 1998 and 2010 by the state's Water Resource Department, only 10% of California's water is consumed by urban uses across the state. Some 50% is used for environmental purposes, such as keeping streams and riverbeds wet. Another 40% is sucked up by the state's agriculture business. So, next you'll only be able to take 3-minute showers, and after that you'll only be allowed to flush the toilet twice a day. So, I mean, I could go into depth about why this is stupid. As the article points out, by a study by the Water Board, the restrictions that they're wanting to make permanent between a span of 3 years only accounted for 1%. Because they're targeting the wrong things. It's not garden hoses that are causing droughts. People like to point out all these people, especially environmentalists. Here's these people with giant lawns. Oh my god, they're watering it. You know what? So, let me just talk about private property real quick. There's people out there that think that water is a natural resource, and to some extent it is, but they think that you have a right to water. Meaning, if I have water in my backyard, I don't have a right to own it because that is a resource of the earth. So somebody can come into my backyard and drink my water. I have no ownership of it. This issue, the drought in California, by the way, which isn't because there's an actual drought, it's because they built a huge city that requires water in a desert. Los Angeles? Yeah, that's in a desert. Just so we're clear. It's not a city built in what used to be a forest. It was built in a desert. You want to see a city built in a forest? Look at Portland, Oregon, which is just north of California. That city's built in a forest in the Pacific Northwest where it rains a lot. A moderate rainforest. And they have plenty of water. There's a nice river that runs through. There's a giant river that runs through Portland, Oregon, that almost looks like an ocean or a giant lake, depending on what vantage point you're looking at, or even a bay, that makes the LA River look like just drops of water from a spilt cup. So the restrictions, I could understand maybe from their point of view the restrictions if it actually made sense. In this case, it doesn't make sense. I find that ridiculous. And this is also in an episode about government forests, because what happens if you pull out a garden hose? The police show up at your door. How are you going to enforce these laws about garden hoses? And when they use them after a period if it rains? Or how long they wait? What grace period? If it rains, who's going to sit there and count the hours before some dude pulls out a garden hose? Are you going to have police patrolling the neighborhood? Because I could think of a million other things that police can do. Just so we're clear. I could think... Let's talk about rape kits. Let's talk about the rape kit backlog. If you don't know what that is, basically, USA Today investigated 180 different police agencies. That's just 180. There's thousands of them. And they found about 90,000 untested, neglected rape kits. And they estimate that it could be as high as 400,000. And the way they figure that is they say, all right, we only got this fraction of agencies, and we saw this amount of neglected rape kits. And then they compared it between urban areas and rural areas. Like, all right, well, there's this many agencies, so let's assume that all these other agencies with similar populations have the same amount of uncontested rape kits. So there's an estimated 400,000 plus rape kits that have not been tested. And it costs about $1,000 to test these rape kits. And we have people talking about putting a $500 fine on people for using a garden hose. And this circles back to the beginning story, too, about marijuana plants. The war on drugs has cost $44 billion, according to some estimates. Links will be in the description box below. $44 billion is how much we spend on the drug war. And some estimates include that the war on drugs squanders $88 billion, because if these drugs were legal and we tax them like we do with tobacco and alcohol, we could generate $44 billion in revenue. And I'm generally against taxes, but I'm okay with the consumption tax to some extent, especially drugs. I'm okay with a slight sin tax to fund the government for military, police, and courts, and all that good stuff. But if you assumed that we know for a fact that we're spending $44 billion on the war on drugs, and if you want to factor in that $44 billion that we could generate in revenue, and then we divide it by $1,000, you could test 88 million uncontested rape kits. And say we don't have that extra $44 billion in tax money that we theoretically estimated could generate by ending the war on drugs, we're still saving another $44 billion on not throwing people in jail for pot or for injecting a needle into their arm. Their life is already ruined, might as well ruin it more. Regardless, you could... So the estimate of the rape kits that you could analyze, is between 44 million and 88 million. And we have 400,000 rape kits. So we wouldn't even need that much money, but that's a much better allocation of resources. We could direct it to much better places. So I know I'm stuttering a lot and I'm talking a lot and you just want me to get on with this. So let us talk about... let's go through the buzz segment. So name is pending, but we'll talk about this buzz segment of stuff that I want to go through. If you give a straw to someone with their drink in California, you may face a $1,000 fine. Imagine going to jail because you couldn't afford a $1,000 fine for giving out a single plastic straw. Also, we face one of the most existential crises known to mankind. We must unite and take this issue head on. We must take action now. We must do it for the kids. Think about the kids. We must do it for the kids. We must follow behind New York and ban Tide Pods. If you're caught with this specific type of laundry detergent, by the way, you will be regarded as a terrorist to mankind, and you will be punished for being an enemy to the youth. We will make an example out of you. We will raid laundromats across the nation and confiscate these little plastic chemical weapons of mass destruction, and they must be dealt with. So, yeah, I got a little triggered there. So, let's just go over what I'm talking about here. There's 8 different attacks on freedom going on, and some of them include the major leader of California State Assembly has introduced legislation that would impose a fine up to $1,000 on any waiter or waitress who offers a plastic drinking straw to a customer without being asked. And then 2 lawmakers in New York have introduced legislation to ban Tide Pods. Yeah, that's it. That's all I'm going to say. It speaks for itself. They're ridiculous. There's environmentalists, by the way, who are okay with sending the police to your doorstep if you give out a plastic straw, because anything for the environment. And yeah, let's ban Tide Pods for the kids. I just want to point out this fact real quick. If your kid is eating Tide Pods, You failed as a parent. I mean, I just don't know what to say. Oh, gosh. Whew. I make myself laugh sometimes. Well, I didn't even get through half of what I want to talk about. I mean, I wanted to talk about SWAT teams. I also wanted to talk about asset forfeiture. I wanted to talk about a 72-year-old woman that was killed over marijuana. I wanted to tell some more jokes, but we're already reaching the 40-minute mark. So let me just conclude this. I'm going to make a part 2 to government force. So this is episode 1. I talked a lot. You might not like it, but this is my Logan For Liberty podcast. Why? Because my name is Logan. It's something I'm starting. I did Slogan of Logan on my Renegade Slogan Media channel. I changed Renegade Slogan Media to Logan For Liberty. The reason why I did that is because Renegade Slogan Media doesn't tell you anything about the page that I'm conducting. Slogan of Logan doesn't tell you anything about the show I'm doing. And I did like 7, 8, 9 episodes of Slogan of Logan. But I decided I would just do Logan For Liberty. Because if you type in liberty, you type in libertarian or any freedom, you might get Logan For Liberty. So it'll be easier to search. These are things that I want to talk about. So that's why it's called Logan For Liberty. And I want to go over things like this. I want to go over government force. I want to talk about culture. I want to talk about economics. I want to talk about everything that comes to mind. I want to talk about policy. So, politics, economics, culture, all of that good stuff. And then when it branches out, government force, police brutality, the war on drugs, government spending, taxes, the effects that certain policies have on the culture and the current state of the culture depending on a certain policy. Those are things I want to talk about, and those are things that I will talk about. So, let me leave you with this. My goal here is to maybe spread some ideas that I like. Spread ideas that I believe in. I'm not trying to coerce you into believing any of my ideas. You may not believe any of my ideas, and to an extent, that's fine. I know that sounds bad, but just bear with me. Ideas, some of them require force. Wealth redistribution requires force. Building a school requires force. Telling people not to put something in their own body ruins their lives more than their life already was ruined. You see somebody injecting heroin on the side of the street, they're probably already homeless. It's probably the only money they had. And then you're going to throw them in jail, and they're going to have a criminal record, along with no home, along with no money. And that even goes over to people who smoke marijuana. Say you have a job, you're being productive, you're producing wealth, and you're bringing home wealth. So this person is both the staple of both Austrian economists and Keynesian economists. I might have pronounced that word wrong. And the left-wing side of politics, if you're consuming and spending, you're doing good. On the Austrian side of economics, if you're being productive and you're saving money, you're being good. This individual who's working, he consumes food, he pays rent, he pays for property, he does stuff for entertainment, and he consumes in the form of smoking marijuana. He buys marijuana. He keeps a pot dispensary open, or depending on states where it's legal. Because we know under the Obama era, I'm not sure about Donald Trump's era, I'd have to look that up. States where pot was legal, the federal government still cracked down on it in some cases. So this guy is a consumer. He's also a producer because he's working. Meaning, he's producing wealth for this company, and this company is producing wealth for the common folk. And then he's probably saving and investing in stuff to make his life better. And meanwhile, that company, with the produced wealth that this person created, they're also saving, consuming. So it's a full circle of economics. There's production, saving, consuming, spending, all involved in a nice little circle of life. And we're going to throw him in jail or fine him because he decided to smoke a marijuana plant, by the way. And marijuana kills less people than alcohol. I like alcohol. I don't like marijuana for certain reasons. I have my reason, but this isn't an episode about that. But you are going to use the force of government to throw him in jail, to cost him his job, all because he decided to do something with his body that he wanted to do that you didn't like. And that is government force. Just think about that. The force of government. Say he wants to smoke a marijuana plant and he's being productive to the economy. He's being a productive citizen. He's paying taxes. He's consuming. He's producing. He's saving. A big, great, old economic circle that benefits everybody. You're going to throw him in jail through the force of government. You're going to send police to his house with a gun. What happens if he resists? What happens if he says, hey, you ain't going to throw me in jail because I'm smoking a plant, right? And he doesn't want to go to jail. He wants to keep working. His employer lets him smoke pot, or his employer doesn't do any background checks or drug tests because they know most of their people smoke marijuana, but it doesn't matter because they're all being productive anyway. You're going to use the force of government to go to this guy's house and throw him in jail. And this applies for things beyond the war on drugs, beyond the drug war. We're talking about using garden hoses. We're going to use police resources, use taxpayer money to enforce garden hose laws, which I find absolutely ridiculous. The same concept applies to pretty much everything you think about. The government is not going to allow this guy to build a house in an area that needs houses because it's so expensive. And this would potentially make society more productive because you're locating people closer to transit, which gives them more time. Let's say living close to transit, to a public transit center, saves you 10 to 30 minutes a day. That is 10 to 30 minutes that you are productive or consuming, which is beneficial to the economy. I know I'm kind of stagnant. I'm creating these thoughts in my head. I'm trying to work it out in my head. We're talking about the government. We're talking about minute things that the government won't let us do. And the only way to enforce these laws is with government. Eating Tide Pods. Okay, let's say that Tide Pods are banned in New York. You're going to force people not to buy... you're going to force companies not to sell Tide Pods in your area? Is Tide not going to be able to make Tide Pods? How are you going to enforce that law? Oh, let's start checking every Mack truck on on the highway and see if they have Tide Pods and they're shipping them to New York. What are you going to do? How are you going to enforce that? Are you going to send the police to arrest the waitress who gave somebody a straw when they didn't ask? Because she can't afford a $1,000 fine? Are you going to have police at every single restaurant watching waiters and waitresses to see if they're going to give out a straw? Are you going to demand that these companies report their waiters and waitresses because they gave out a straw? You're going to charge them $1,000 when their rent is already $3,400? This would come from California and New York. Makes sense. So just think about that. Some of these ideas that we throw out there, maybe for good intentions, maybe straws are really threatening the environment. You're still sacrificing human life and human freedom. You're still using the force of government to enforce these laws. That is where I have an issue. That is where I draw the line. So this was part 1 of government force. Look out for part 2 of government force. Thank you for listening to the Logan For Liberty podcast. Have a good one.